Coles and Woolworths are set to increase their range of beer, wine and spirits, but shoppers won't necessarily know they're buying house brands. The two supermarket giants have registered a string of trademarks with IP Australia as they prepare to expand their range of private label alcoholic drinks. And there's evidence house brands are growing in popularity. A report by IBISWorld says they're expected to make up to 10% of wine sales by 2013. Robert Bryant is the General Manager of IBISWorld and he joins us now from our Melbourne studio. Robert Bryant, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Ali. The difference between the private labels and what you might describe as house brands is that the private labels are seeking to create some tiers and compete directly with premium brands that we're traditionally used to buying. The home brands, where you clearly know you're buying a Coles or a Woolworths product, are typically in the commodity products such as your milk and your flour and sugar, etc. The supermarket industry as a whole is a mature one, and the increasing competition that exists between the two major brands and of course new entrants from overseas means they're looking for any opportunity to rationalise less profitable products and brands and introduce more profitable ones, and the private labels are certainly very profitable for the supermarkets.
In terms of general groceries, what proportion would now be private label? What proportion would be home brand?
Well, when we look at the private label sector, what we know is that it's now around 23% of all grocery sales. So that's grown significantly over the last 5 years. If you go back 5 years, it was only around 13%. And over the next few years, we expect that to grow to around 30%. That's for the private label products. It's certainly fair to say that they are providing individual brands in these private labels. So they're not branding it as Coles and Woolworths. They're adopting brand names that they're registering and treating as any marketer would, as any brand would. They're treating them in such a way and presenting them to compete with the premium brands on the shelf. So it is hard to sometimes pick them, and of course the quality's there as well. I mean, the supermarkets aren't going to sell or stock products that don't move and that consumers don't respond well to. So they're able to position these products very price competitively alongside premium brands.
That said, what does it mean for smaller manufacturers? How do they possibly compete? How do they possibly get shelf space when you've got so many private label products?
It's been an increasing issue for smaller brands in recent years. The supermarket industry is mature, and as such they are looking to rationalise the less profitable brands and products. So that level of competition and the issues of getting decent shelf space aren't new to small brands and small labels. What it does mean is that for consumers they've got a broader choice, albeit some of those being privately owned by the supermarkets. So there's
is it putting smaller players out of business? Can you say that?
Well, we know that it's taking market share, so in that respect it would be fair to assume that it's putting them under pressure, and they've got to find alternative means of distribution, and that obviously isn't easy when you've got two major players representing 70% of the grocery market in Australia. Aldi have come in and taken 3%, being very competitive, and IGA are obviously there as well. So what we do know is that it makes it very hard. It doesn't remove all opportunity, and as we've said, it's really private labels looking to account for around 30% of all grocery sales within 5 years. So there's still a fair margin of other products available out there in the marketplace.
Robert Bryant, many thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Supermarket giants Coles and Woolworths have long been big players in the liquor market, but now they're stepping up the battle. They're introducing more of their own wine, spirit and beer brands. Not that you'd know, because as Laura Sparks reports, there's no mention of them on the labels.
In the packaged sales of alcohol, yes, they're hard to really control it.
It's not immediately obvious that they are owned by the supermarket chains.
It's a marketer's dream, devising wine labels that sound authentic and make people want to buy them. But look out, it's not all in the name when it comes to choosing wine.
Wine, as an example, is likely to grow from 8 to around 10% of all wine sales in Australia.
Australian General Manager of IBISWorld, Robert Bryant, analysed the attack of supermarket home brands.
Beer has come along very quickly in the last few years. It used to be absolutely zero. It's up to around 3%, and we'd expect to see that grow to 5% of total beer sales.
Our customers at the end of the day decide what it is they want to buy. They're too smart for us to be pushing product down their throat that they don't want.
As always, it's all about the marketing. That was
Now, oil and gas tipped to be the next big thing for Australia, with IBISWorld unveiling its forecast for top industries in the next financial year, expecting the sector will grow by 18% this financial year on the back of higher gas output, new sites being discovered and existing gas fields expanded. Brooke Corty speaking earlier with Robert Bryant, IBISWorld General Manager, Australia.
Well, of course, what we're really looking at here are some very basic factors of supply and demand, and the oil and gas industry is going to benefit from what we believe is increasing demand coupled with the ability to provide that. Well, there's obviously challenges depending on continued demand from around the world, and with new field discoveries there's obviously the ongoing challenges that the industry faces as it has to tackle productivity issues to provide that product to market.
Also, I was interested to see on the top 10 growth industries, renewable energy.
Well, there's increased attention obviously due to the current political discussion, and with the government's target to have 20% of energy from renewable sources by 2020, we expect to see a significant increase in activity in that industry sector over the next 12 months as the industry gears up to provide those energy sources. And of course, what's important to remember here that we are talking about revenue, and revenue increase is one thing. Of course, most industries and companies are very much interested in profitability. So at the moment we're seeing an increase in the revenue side of the industry, and as things go forward and take-up continues, we'd expect to see performance of individual companies improve.
Yeah, online retailing, that's going to create quite a buzz again this year. You've got growth forecast at 9% or $5.5 billion in revenue. So is that about local retailers boosting online offerings, or does that growth come from other means?
Well, you're right, Brooke. It is about local retailers gearing up their offering to the domestic market. What we've seen over the last 12 months has been a great deal of discussion around online, and IBISWorld's seen a large amount of business come in from overseas as a result of that, and people going offshore. But it's still relatively small, and it's important to remember we're talking about a relatively small portion of retail when we look at online. But the next 12 months is going to be about local retailers stepping up their online offerings and trying to cater to the trend, which is for people to purchase them in the online environment. So we see that growing very strongly. In fact, that's going to grow by around 4 times the typical growth rate for retail as a whole. So you can see how significant it is in terms of acquiring market share. Well, what we've discovered by taking a look at the industry just recently is that it's a $9 billion industry, and of that, around $550 million revenue is generated through live export. So the Indonesian ban represents around 50% of that export revenue. So 50% of live export revenue comes from Indonesia.
And so we're looking at roughly $250 million worth or so?
Yeah, we'd estimate that to be around $270 million in terms of revenue generated by live export of cattle to Indonesia. So
do you have any kind of research or details on how many jobs, I guess, that would support? Because this has been
impacts the niche operators that generate the majority of their revenue from the export market. So there's obviously a large number of those in Northern Territory and WA, and without doubt it's going to impact them. Domestically, there are opportunities around organic and the more environmentally and welfare-friendly aspects of the cattle industry, and the way that feeds into processed beef domestically. We process, obviously, the vast majority of our beef domestically, and in fact the majority of our processed beef products. So around 90% of exports of beef are generated through processed products. So there remains opportunity there. And on the live export side, all the while that industry remains, there has been some increased demand from other areas such as Egypt and Saudi Arabia.
And key markets being also South Korea, and I think the US is a key market for our processed meats, is that right?
For the processed meats, absolutely, yes. So there's still opportunity there for the industry, and they're the reasons why IBISWorld's currently suggesting growth somewhere in the order of 1.8% per annum over the next 5 years.
So even with the US in recessionary conditions, okay, not technical recession, but recessionary conditions, I mean, you look at the other market, which is South Korea, they're looking at rising interest rates. You still see that there are markets that we can kind of grow in?
Well, the US market may prove to be difficult, and it's actually, the US market has posed a threat to our live export market as well, because in recent times they have actually become more competitive in the export trade, as you can imagine, with the depreciating US dollar, and that's done nothing, or the strengthening Aussie dollar has done nothing to help that situation. So the export side of the beef cattle industry in Australia has had a tough time for a good number of years already.